The story of the British Empire in America is not only one of exploration and expansion. It is a story of survival, conflict, and adaptation. From the first perilous voyages across the Atlantic to the deadly encounters with Native Americans, this is the tale of how a fledgling empire tried to establish itself in an unfamiliar world. By the late 16th century, England faced rising population pressures, economic change, and competition from Spain and France. The nation's rulers, merchants, and investors sought new lands, resources, and trade routes. Joint stock companies were formed, private ventures with royal backing. Among these, the Virginia Company of London became one of the most ambitious. Its mission? Establish a permanent English settlement in North America and generate profit from raw materials and trade. The Crown granted charters that gave companies legal authority to claim land, govern settlers, and establish trade. But these charters also carried immense responsibility. Settlers would have to survive on their own, facing harsh climates, disease, and the unknown. Few in England truly understood the challenges awaiting them across the Atlantic. The voyage to America was a trial from the very beginning. Ships were crowded, provisions limited, and storms frequent. Voyagers endured cramped conditions, spoiled food, and the threat of disease. Some were seasoned sailors, others were farmers, craftsmen, or poor laborers hoping for a new life. Weeks turned into months. Scurvy, dysentery, and seasickness claimed lives even before reaching land. When the fleet finally sighted the Virginia coastline in 1607, survivors were exhausted. They stepped onto an unfamiliar shore, faced with swamps, mosquitoes, and a land that seemed as hostile as the sea they had left behind. Jamestown, the first permanent English settlement, offered little comfort. Marshes bred mosquitoes carrying deadly disease. Fresh water was often brackish. Crops failed. Settlers, unfamiliar with local agriculture, struggled to adapt. Winter brought hunger and death. By the end of the first year, only a fraction of the original settlers survived. Leadership was unstable. The colony's council faced disputes and rivalries. Decisions about planting crops, building shelters, and negotiating with Native Americans were matters of life and death. Despite these hardships, the English held firm. They had a vision of empire, and they were determined to endure. The Powhatan Confederacy dominated the lands around Jamestown. Their leaders, Chief Powhatan, observed the newcomers with caution. Early relations were tense. Trade and diplomacy coexisted with suspicion and violence. The settlers sought corn, fish, and timber. In return, they offered trinkets, metal tools, and promises. Misunderstandings were frequent. Cultural differences and communication barriers often led to conflict. By 1609, tensions escalated. The starving time began, a winter when supplies ran out, and many settlers starved or resorted to extreme measures to survive. Native Americans occasionally raided the settlement, while English parties sometimes attacked villages. Each side viewed the other as a threat, not a neighbor. Survival required constant vigilance. As Jamestown stabilized, English settlers began exploring further upriver and along the coast. They established farms, dug wells, and built fortifications. Yet internal struggles persisted. Leadership disputes and the harsh environment strained morale. The colony relied on indentured servants and, increasingly, African slaves. This labor system helped produce tobacco, the colony's first profitable cash crop. Tobacco farming, however, required vast tracts of land. Expansion often meant encroaching on Native American territories, fueling further conflict. Survival was no longer just about food or disease. It was about navigating alliances, political authority, and territorial disputes. By 1610, the relationship between the English and Powhatan Confederacy had deteriorated. The First Powhatan War erupted after raids on plantations and settlements. Settlers built forts, organized militias, and launched counterattacks. Casualties mounted on both sides. English soldiers and settlers faced ambushes, while Native American villages were sometimes destroyed. Disease, starvation, and fatigue compounded the suffering. For the English, every battle was a test of survival. For the Powhatan, it was defense of their ancestral lands. This cycle of violence and retaliation would continue for decades, shaping the pattern of colonial expansion. Survival was not just for men. Women and children endured extraordinary hardships. They built shelters, cooked meals, tended gardens, and cared for the sick, all while avoiding attacks. Infant mortality was high. Disease and malnutrition claimed countless lives. Women sometimes acted as diplomats, learning local customs and negotiating with neighboring tribes. Their resilience kept the colony functioning, even when the men were away at work, exploration, or battle. The Chesapeake region was rife with disease. Malaria, dysentery, and typhoid were constant threats. Swamps bred mosquitoes, and stagnant water poisoned crops. Droughts alternated with floods, leaving settlers vulnerable. Even when food was available, preservation methods were primitive. Starvation became routine during harsh winters. Some settlers ate roots, bark, or spoiled grain. Letters and diaries recount the desperation of families struggling to survive. The English had come seeking opportunity, but nature had its own deadly agenda. By the 1620s and 1630s, settlements expanded along rivers and inland. The English encountered other Native American groups, such as the Powhatan's allies and enemies. Alliances were strategic. Some tribes traded with the English for weapons or goods. Others formed confederacies to resist encroachment. Negotiation, diplomacy, and occasional warfare defined these interactions. For the English, understanding local politics became as important as farming or defending against raids. Mistakes could cost lives, and miscommunication often led to violence. The colony gradually developed a rudimentary system of governance. The House of Burgesses, established in 1619, allowed settlers to elect representatives. Rules about property, labor, and defense were codified. Military structures evolved, with militias trained to respond to Native American raids or other threats. These early experiences shaped the British approach to colonization: economic focus, hierarchical governance, and reliance on both diplomacy and force when necessary. The lessons were hard-earned, written in lives lost and communities nearly destroyed. Tobacco exports brought profit, but the colony remained dependent on supplies from England. Shortages of tools, weapons, and food were frequent. Farming was labor-intensive, requiring indentured servants and, increasingly, enslaved Africans. Settlers faced theft, crop failures, and price fluctuations in Europe. Economic pressures influenced relations with Native Americans. English expansion into fertile land provoked hostility, yet trade remained crucial. Survival, wealth, and power were deeply intertwined in this volatile environment. The 1620s and 1630s saw a series of conflicts known as the Powhatan Wars, a cycle of attack and retaliation. Militias defended settlements, while Native American tribes sought to protect their lands. Disease often struck both sides. Entire villages could vanish within months. English settlements grew cautiously, fortified against potential raids. Survival required adaptability, cunning, and often sheer luck. Every journey into the wilderness was a calculated risk. The English experience in early America set the stage for centuries of expansion. The lessons of diplomacy, warfare, and survival informed later settlements in New England, Maryland, and beyond. Colonists learned to navigate alliances, develop agriculture suited to local conditions, and defend themselves against both nature and human threats. The British Empire's foothold in North America was hard-won, costly in human life, and defined by constant struggle. The story of the British Empire in America is not one of instant conquest or effortless triumph. It is a story of survival against disease, hunger, and conflict, of settlers learning to adapt to foreign lands, of interactions, sometimes peaceful, sometimes violent, with the Native Americans whose lives and lands were forever changed. From cramped ships crossing the Atlantic to fortified settlements along rivers and forests, the empire's foundations were built on endurance, negotiation, and resilience. It is a story of determination, of mistakes and lessons, and ultimately the beginning of an empire that would shape the modern world.